You ever walk into a place and feel like the room has already decided who you are before you even say a word? That's how my afternoon started at Gate B12 in a mid-size airport. The sun outside was lazy, my carry-on was neat, and I had a meeting in 2 hours that could change my whole year. But none of that mattered when Clara, the gate attendant, looked at me and said, "Ma'am, you need to step aside. This is first class." Everybody froze like the world had hit pause, and for a beat I watched faces tilt toward me, phones angle up like I'd become a live show nobody asked for, except I was the one being watched. I'm Maya Carter, CEO of Carter & Co. I thought, but you don't get to be an introduction when someone's already made a judgment. My suit fit my briefcase held a deck titled Skyline Partnership, confidential, and my boarding pass was paid for and legal, yet I could feel suspicion in the air the way you feel a storm coming. Clara scanned my pass 3 times, then frowned at the reader like it was lying. The light flashed green. The little beep sounded, but her face tightened more with every beep. "This doesn't look right," she said loud enough for the line to hear, like saying it made it true. I kept my hands visible because I've learned you calm the room by not giving it a reason to panic. "I'll wait," I told her because I didn't want to create a scene I couldn't control, not yet. And then the line went live. Someone turned on a camera. Someone else whispered discrimination. Another typed furiously on a phone, hashtags forming like lightning. Security was called. A supervisor arrived. Mark, been at Skyline for 20 years, posture of a man who knew how to close a conversation he didn't want to finish. "We're going to verify the card," he said. "Step over there." They asked for proof of employment, which felt like a punch that landed sideways because they weren't asking everyone. A middle-aged man who'd just boarded waved his carry-on like a flag of legitimacy, and no one blinked. I handed over a card that said, Maya Carter, CEO, Carter & Co. The camera zoomed in. People whispered. I could hear one woman say, "Isn't she the consultant who works with airports?" And another reply, "No way." I'll be honest, inside I tighten up when this happens. Not because I'm unsteady, but because I know the stakes. I had 15 missed calls from my team in Atlanta. I had a 3:30 partners briefing on my calendar that could decide a multi-million-dollar rollout. But what I mostly felt was the old familiar ache of being sized up by an instinct that doesn't like my face, an ache that has a cheap metallic taste. Then it flipped. The minute I showed a single piece of paper, not a boast, not a threat, just the partnership agreement cover with Skyline's logo, the whole room changed temperature. Clara stepped back. Mark blinked. "What is that?" he asked, voice going small. I smiled like a person who's been handed the exact words they needed. "It's the partnership memo you'll be discussing at 4:00, I said, and the paper wasn't the point so much as the truth it represented, that I belonged here exactly as much as anyone else. Now, if this were a movie, there'd be a neat cut to applause, but life isn't that obliging. The twist was that the document wasn't just a proof of purchase. It named my company as a top consultant for Skyline, a multi-year agreement numbers that made eyes widen. Page 12 was highlighted in yellow, a detail I didn't need to wave like a banner. I simply let it be. The crowd shifted some faces, flushing with the uncomfortable knowledge that they'd assumed wrong, others smirking as if they hadn't lost anything by doubting me. Mark called corporate, and corporate called back. An operations manager breezed in, hair in a hurry apology already in the shape of his mouth. He didn't look at me so much as at the camera phones. I heard someone in the crowd murmur, "You can't do that," and another person say, "She handled that so calmly." That's the thing. Calm is a weapon in a way. It lets you aim the point you want to land without anger smearing the view. But there was a point where calm wasn't enough. I wasn't interested in theatrics, but I also couldn't pretend this was just a one-off. I set my documents on the counter, opened my red portfolio, and put the partnership packet where everyone could see it, not to humiliate, but to make accountability impossible to avoid. "This isn't about me," I said, looking straight at Mark and the operations manager, Cass. "It's about patterns. It's about the cost, legal, reputational, moral, of making people invisible until they prove they're visible." People leaned in. A man near the back said, "Name the costs," like economics was the only language that could move them. I did. Settlements lost, corporate contracts, supplier churn. Numbers, facts, the kind of language executives listened for. But I also told them the human thing, that this tired little script of suspicion costs dignity like a tax. It drains talent and trust in ways that don't go on any ledger until the headlines arrive. Cameras kept rolling. Clips were shared. Someone's TikTok hit a few thousand viewers in minutes. The room that had been ready to shame me was now watching their own faces on a tiny mirror of truth, the internet. Sky Management offered training and review words that can mean 100 different things. I wanted commitment, not lip service. So I proposed something concrete. Bias interruption training for frontline staff, an internal reporting mechanism with real escalation, and quarterly diversity accountability metrics tied to procurement decisions. Cass bristled a bit, the corporate armor going up, but she could see what I saw. The risk if they didn't act. "Give us time to review," she said. I countered, "Give us dates, not promises. Start next quarter pilot in 3 hubs, measurable outcomes." It wasn't a negotiation, it was a blueprint. And when I mentioned that Carter and Comey would help design and implement it, the atmosphere moved from confrontation to collaboration, because now it was about business continuity as much as justice. They agreed in principle. They agreed because footage was spreading and because losing a partnership that size is a board-level problem. But here's the key. My goal wasn't to humiliate Clara or Mark. I wanted a system that made the mistake less likely, an architecture that protects dignity before headlines force change. I wanted people like Clara to get the training, not the sack, because change that's sustainable comes from education, not punishment alone. I boarded the plane with a quiet that felt like victory, not vengeful, just right. The man who'd earlier nodded with arrogance caught my eye and mouthed, "Sorry." The flight attendant who'd first questioned me came over later and said I've never been trained for this, with real confusion, not malice. I told her that's about to change, and it did. Over the next year, Skyline launched the training, the reporting app, the accountability dashboards. Staff who had been defensive at the gate were now facilitating de-escalation's mentors in the very programs they once mocked. Complaints dropped in pilot hubs, and more importantly, the culture shifted 2 degrees toward inclusion. A shift that doesn't show up in a graph overnight but matters more than any quarterly profit. And still, I want you to hear the messy truth. This didn't happen because I'm special. It happened because I refused to be erased, and because the moment was documented. Documentation matters. Witnesses matter. Strategy matters. But so does privilege. I could make demands because I had leverage. Not everyone does. That's the part that keeps me awake sometimes, wondering how many people get shoved aside silently because they don't have a partnership to brandish or a camera to hold up. So, here's the hard bit. What do we do about the dozen small indignities that never bubble up to the viral level? How do we build systems that protect everyone, not just the visible few? That's the real fight, and it's boring and bureaucratic and necessary, and it's where durable change lives. If you've ever been discounted because of your appearance, your accent, your clothes, your name, you know that tightness in your chest I'm talking about. Tell me about it. What should people do when they see it happen? Step in, call it out, document, or something else? Do you think companies should be legally required to publish how they handle these incidents? Or is that overreach? Do apologies mean anything if they're not followed by policy? Drop your story in the comments, short, plain, real. Share one time you were judged and what happened next, or 2 things you think would actually fix the problem. If you found this useful, share it so someone else sees it and maybe thinks twice before they say, "Step aside." If nothing else, let's start a conversation that turns momentary outrage into permanent change, because dignity shouldn't be viral to be valid.